Welcome back to the Path to Peace Therapy podcast. If you're new here, my name is Stephanie Buckley. I'm a parenting strategist and family systems coach who specializes in ADHD, executive functioning challenges, emotional regulation, and the patterns that keep families stuck in the same arguments on repeat. I'm also a mom to a thriving neurodivergent 23-year-old son, and I've been married for over 3 decades. I created this podcast because I didn't want parents to feel alone. I wanted to translate what's going on under the behavior neurologically, psychologically, and relationally, so you can stop parenting from panic and start parenting from structure, strategy, and calm authority. Dear parent, I see you standing outside that closed bedroom door, listening to the rapid clicks of a controller or the mindless scroll of a TikTok feed. I know you aren't just annoyed. You are grieving. You're grieving the version of their 20s you thought you'd be celebrating by now. You feel like you're watching them leak their potential into a glowing rectangle, and the guilt, the what did I miss, is heavy. Please hear me. Their dopamine dysregulation is not your moral failure. Their freeze response is not a reflection of your character. You can love them fiercely and still be exhausted by them. Today, let's put down the shame and pick up a strategy. Peace doesn't start when they change. It starts when you reclaim your own calm authority. In the world of family systems and neurobiology, we are no longer guessing about the impact of digital immersion. Science has caught up to the gut feeling parents have had for years. What we know now that we simply didn't have the data for a decade ago is that social media and gaming are not just hobbies. They are highly engineered neurobiological environments. Here is the breakdown of the most significant shifts in our understanding as of 2026. The slot machine of the mind, intermittent reinforcement. Years ago, we thought kids just liked games. Now, we understand intermittent variable reinforcement. Then, we thought social media was about connection. Now, we know the brain gets the biggest dopamine hit from the uncertainty of the reward. It's not the like itself. It's the anticipation of whether a like or a win is coming. This is the exact mechanism used in slot machines, and it is built into every infinite scroll and loot box to create behavioral persistence, the inability to stop even when it's no longer fun. To truly understand why your 20-something is struggling, you have to look at the massive gap between the brain's manual requirements in the real world versus the automated ease of the digital world. In the real world, a high-stakes task like applying for a job requires the prefrontal cortex to handle complex planning and task initiation from scratch. But in a video game, that heavy lifting is bypassed by a quest log that tells the player exactly where to go and what to do, effectively outsourcing the brain's planning center to the software. Similarly, financial responsibility in adulthood demands a high level of delayed gratification, the ability to work now for a payoff months away, whereas the digital world provides instant in-game currency and immediate upgrades, training the brain to expect a work-to-reward ratio that simply doesn't exist in a career. This discrepancy extends into how they manage their physical environment and their interpersonal relationships. While cooking a meal or cleaning a house requires the brain to sequence multiple steps and maintain focus without a distraction, a game provides a literal progress bar, keeping the brain tethered to the task with artificial pings of achievement. Even emotional regulation is handled differently. In adulthood, handling criticism or a difficult conversation requires the top-down control of the prefrontal cortex to soothe the emotional centers of the brain. In the digital world, that manual labor is replaced by a mute or block button. When you see your child stalling, you aren't seeing a lack of desire. You are seeing a brain that has become accustomed to a digital shortcut for every difficult executive function that adulthood now requires them to perform manually. Dear parent, if you are frustrated that your child can lead a 40-person raid in a video game, but can't seem to mail a package or update a resume, please know that you aren't looking at a lack of intelligence. You are looking at the difference between an automated brain and a manual one. In the digital world, the developers have done the hard work of the prefrontal cortex for them. They provided the map, the goal, the immediate feedback, and the social mute button. When they step away from the screen, their brain suddenly has to build its own map and find its own go signal, and that muscle has been atrophying. They aren't lazy, they are untrained for the high-friction, low-dopamine reality of adulthood. Today, stop asking them why they don't just do it, and start realizing that they are learning to drive a manual transmission brain in an automatic world. We aren't here to shame the stall, we're here to help them find the gears. Physical brain changes, gray matter, and prefrontal cortex. We now have neuroimaging that shows the physical toll of chronic digital overstimulation. The discovery: heavy social media and gaming use are correlated with decreased gray matter density in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control, planning, and emotional regulation. The impact. This is why your 20-something seems incapable of starting a job search. Their mental control center is physically underactive, making task initiation feel like climbing a mountain. Downregulation, the flatlining of joy. We used to think gaming was just an escape. Now we understand neuroadaptation, downregulation. The science. When the brain is flooded with high-intensity, fast dopamine for hours, it protects itself by shrinking or shutting down dopamine receptors. The result: this raises the boredom threshold. Normal, healthy activities, a walk, a conversation, a work task, no longer produce enough dopamine to be felt. To your child, the real world doesn't just feel boring, it feels physically painful and gray because their brain is chemically deaf to low-level rewards. The vampire biology, circadian disruption. We used to think staying up late was just poor discipline. Now we know about blue light and cortisol spikes. The discovery: short-form video and competitive gaming don't just keep them awake. They trigger a cortisol and adrenaline surge that mimics a fight-or-flight response. The result: even after they turn off the screen, their body is in a state of chemical arousal. They aren't just not tired. They are biologically incapable of falling into restorative REM sleep, leading to the chronic irritability and brain fog parents see the next day. Have you noticed the volume dial in your home? When they get loud, you get louder. When they shut down and go gray, you lean in harder, desperate for a response. In family systems, we call this symmetrical escalation. Your nervous systems are literally mirroring one another in a race to the bottom. If you are parenting from a place of panic or a desperate need to rescue, they will sense that instability as a threat and retreat even further into the safety of their screen. Your greatest tool isn't a better argument, it's your non-anxious presence. When you hold a firm boundary with a steady pulse, you become the anchor their drifting ship needs. Staying quiet isn't giving up. It's a masterclass in regulation. You aren't pushing them out of the room. You are finally creating a space safe enough for them to step back into it. Today's episode is for the parent watching their 20-something stall out. You're seeing them fuse to a screen gaming, scrolling, and drifting while their motivation collapses and the job search hits a standstill. Every "put the phone down" turns into a family war, leaving you torn between holding a boundary and accidentally enabling. We're diving deep into the why, from the neurochemistry of dopamine loops to the fragile psychology of identity formation. But we aren't just diagnosing the problem, we're giving you the blueprint for the solution. We'll discuss practical structure, environmental tools like the brick, and the body-based regulation your child needs to finally recalibrate their nervous system. What do you do when your adult child is more connected to their phone than their own future? Today, we're tackling the stuck 20-something, the one lost to gaming, erratic sleep, and digital loops. If your home has turned into a constant debate over motivation, this is for you. We're breaking down the family systems and brain chemistry, keeping them tethered to the screen. More importantly, we're moving toward action. We'll cover how to stop the arguing and start implementing real-world supports, including environmental hacks like the brick and nervous system tools to help them transition from scrolling to living. Many parents are baffled by why their 20-something stays up until 4 a.m. and sleeps until 2 p.m. This isn't just a bad habit, it's a biological feedback loop. Blue light and melatonin. High-intensity screens suppress melatonin, the hormone that tells the brain it's nighttime. The cortisol spike. When a young adult games late, they are in a fight or flight state. Their body pumps out cortisol and adrenaline to stay alert for the mission. By the time they turn the console off, their body is too chemically wired to drop into REM sleep. The solution: we don't fix the sleep, we fix the light hygiene. This is where the brick comes in, locking the stimulating apps 2 hours before the intended sleep time to allow the chemical storm to settle. If you want to stop the arguments, you have to start with the neurochemistry. We often treat gaming like a character flaw, but it's actually a dopamine delivery system. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter that manages your child's motivation and reward circuitry. It's less about the pleasure of the game and more about the pursuit of the win. When that system is overstimulated for hours a day, the brain's baseline shifts. This is why a moral lecture about wasting time fails. You're arguing with a neurotransmitter, and the neurotransmitter is winning. When they spend hours gaming or scrolling, they are repeatedly activating the brain's reward circuitry, especially the mesolimbic dopamine pathway. This pathway includes areas like the ventral tegmental area and nucleus accumbens, which help encode reward and drive. Over time, with repeated high-intensity stimulation, the brain adapts through a process called downregulation. Downregulation means dopamine receptors become less responsive because they are being hit too frequently and too intensely. The brain's baseline starts to feel flat. This is why normal life starts to look boring to them. Job applications are boring. Folding laundry is boring. A walk feels pointless. A conversation feels slow. They are not necessarily choosing boredom. Their brain is experiencing reduced reward sensitivity compared to the stimulation they've trained it on. Now here's the part parents miss and then get scared by. When you remove gaming or drastically reduce it, your child may look physically unwell. That can include fatigue, irritability, headaches, body heaviness, low mood, and what parents describe as "he looks sick." This is a nervous system recalibrating. It's not hallucinations, it's not psychosis, it's the body coming down off a high stimulation baseline and having to restabilize. The brain is essentially saying, "Where did my fast reward go?" And the nervous system reads that as distress. This is also where neuroplasticity matters. Neuroplasticity is the brain's capacity to reorganize based on repeated experience. If you keep feeding the brain fast dopamine, it will wire for fast dopamine. If you gradually stabilize inputs, sleep, protein, movement, predictable structure, the brain can slowly regain baseline sensitivity. But you cannot do that with one big confrontation. You do it with consistency. You take the console away, and day one they sleep all day, complain of feeling awful, and snap at everyone. Parents often back off because they feel guilty. But what's happening is the nervous system is adjusting. Your job is not to panic and reverse course. Your job is to keep structure steady and add regulation supports. Now, let's talk behavioral psychology. Gaming and social media use intermittent variable reinforcement, a term from operant conditioning research associated with B.F. Skinner. Intermittent variable reinforcement means rewards are delivered unpredictably. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get the rare item, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you level up quickly. Sometimes you grind forever. This unpredictability is not accidental. It produces the strongest behavioral persistence because the brain keeps anticipating the next possible reward. Slot machines use the same reinforcement schedule, Social media algorithms use it too. You scroll, and occasionally you get a hit something funny, something validating, a message, a like. That unpredictability keeps the loop alive. So when parents say, just stop, they are asking a nervous system to walk away from a system that has been training it through reinforcement to persist. This is not simply willpower. This is conditioning. Your 22-year-old says, I'm almost done, but done never comes. That's because the system is built around near wins and ongoing quests. They aren't lying the way you think. They're caught in a reinforcement loop. Here is the irony that matters. Gaming looks like chaos to you, but to your 20-something, it often feels like the most organized part of their world. Video games operate as closed systems. A closed system is an environment with clear rules, consistent boundaries, predictable outcomes, and measurable objectives. Early adulthood is an open system, messy, ambiguous, delayed feedback, unclear timelines, social uncertainty, and no clear scoreboard. In a game, the rules are explicit. The objective is clear. The feedback is immediate. Feedback is a psychological mechanism, information about performance that helps the brain adjust behavior. Immediate feedback strengthens learning. Real life does not provide immediate feedback, especially in adulthood. Job applications disappear into silence. College decisions take time. Social efforts don't always get reciprocated. The brain hates delayed feedback because it increases uncertainty. Games also provide hierarchy and status markers, rank, levels, badges, titles. That matters because competence is one of the 3 core psychological needs in self-determination theory. DC and Ryan. Self-determination. Theory proposes that motivation is strongest when we experience competence, I can do it, autonomy, I have choice, and relatedness, I belong. In a game, competence is measurable, autonomy is built in, and relatedness often comes from teams, guilds, chats, and shared mission. In real life, your 21-year-old might feel incompetent, powerless, and socially unsure. So the brain chooses the environment where these needs are met. Now add predictability. Predictability means the brain can anticipate outcomes based on stable patterns. Predictability is a signal of safety. When the brain recognizes pattern, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, calms down. Games are predictable beneath complexity. The rules don't randomly change. Cause and effect remain stable. This creates contingency clarity, meaning the link between behavior and outcome is obvious. Do X, get Y. Real life in early adulthood often lacks contingency clarity. That creates uncertainty stress, the physiological tension of not knowing what will happen next. Uncertainty stress increases avoidance, procrastination, irritability, and shutdown. Your 22-year-old can tell you exactly how to rank up, what the rules are, how to win, how to improve strategy, and what happens if they fail. But when you say, apply for jobs, they freeze because the system is unclear. Which jobs? What if I fail? What if I'm judged? What if no one responds? Games feel safe because they are structured. Adulthood feels unsafe because it's ambiguous. When your 20-something is living at home, you're parenting in a developmental gray zone. They're not 15, but they're not fully launched. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functioning, impulse control, planning, emotional regulation, and delayed gratification, continues developing into the mid-20s. That doesn't excuse behavior, it explains why structure still matters. This is where many parents make a swing to extremes. One extreme is authoritarian control, lots of threats, punishments, and emotional escalation. The other extreme is permissive avoidance. No structure because you're exhausted, afraid of conflict, or trying to keep the peace. Both extremes keep the pattern going. When they still live at home, you shift from parenting a child to running a household with a young adult. This becomes more like a contract, clear expectations, predictable consequences, and respectful tone. Instead of because I said so, you move toward If you live here, these are the household expectations. If you choose not to meet them, these are the outcomes. That language respects autonomy while holding boundaries. When we talk about the stuckness that defines this developmental gray zone, we are often looking at a phenomenon parents misread as laziness, but which is actually the physiological state of learned helplessness. Coined by psychologist Martin Seligman, learned helplessness occurs when an individual repeatedly experiences a perceived lack of control over their environment and eventually stops trying altogether, even when viable options are right in front of them. For many 20-somethings, years of academic struggles, social rejection, or the persistent overwhelm of ADHD have effectively trained their nervous system to expect defeat. This isn't a choice. It is a biological pruning of effort. The brain, seeking to conserve energy, becomes mathematically convinced that the cost of trying outweighs the probability of success, leading to a profound collapse of motivation. This psychological surrender often manifests physically as the freeze response. While most of us are familiar with fight or flight, freeze is the nervous system's last resort survival strategy when a challenge feels insurmountable. In this state, the body enters a functional collapse governed by the dorsal vagal complex, causing the mind to fog, the body to feel heavy, and task initiation to become physically painful. To a parent, this looks like a lack of care or defiance. To the young adult, it feels like being trapped behind an invisible wall. Shame only deepens this immobilization, turning a temporary setback into a permanent identity. While guilt might prompt a person to fix a mistake, shame tells the young adult that they are the mistake, triggering a deeper retreat into the numbness of a screen where they can finally feel a sense of fake competence. When your child is in freeze, they don't need a drill sergeant to demand they just launch. They need a strategist to help them rebuild agency. By focusing on micro objectives and ridiculously easy wins, we begin to crack the wall of learned helplessness, teaching the brain one completed task at a time that their actions can, in fact, create change. This pairs with the freeze response, a stress response state where the body immobilizes. Freeze is not defiance, it is shutdown. In freeze, task initiation becomes painful. The nervous system chooses avoidance because avoidance reduces immediate distress. You ask your 22-year-old to call a potential employer, and they say they will, and then they don't. You interpret it as disrespect. But it may be freeze, they feel incompetent, fear rejection, and the brain chooses numbness. Gaming then becomes a self-regulation strategy, imperfect but effective short-term. This is where you push strategically. You push on small actions that rebuild agency. Agency means the belief that one's actions can create change. Agency is built through completion, not lecturing. The power struggle cycle: amygdala, shame, and why. Lectures backfire. Let's name the emotional pattern that drains families. Parents say, "You're wasting your life." The young adult hears, "I'm a failure." Then they escape back into gaming. That is the shame loop. The amygdala detects threat can be physical danger, but it can also be threat to autonomy, dignity, or belonging. When the amygdala is activated, the nervous system shifts into fight, flight, or freeze, and the prefrontal cortex becomes less accessible. This is why your best reasoning doesn't land during an argument. You're talking to a brain in survival mode. Shame makes this worse. Shame is not guilt. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am wrong. Shame increases avoidance and secrecy. When shame rises, gaming becomes even more appealing because it offers relief and competence. You say, "At your age, I had a job." They shut down, slam the door, and game for 8 hours. That is not because they're winning. That's because they're escaping the nervous system pain of shame plus uncertainty. So where do you push? You push structurally, not emotionally. You stop negotiating during dysregulation. You state expectations calmly and repeatedly. like a system, because the nervous system learns through repetition. This is where environmental structure can change everything, and it's why I like tools like the brick. The brick is a physical device that requires the phone to be tapped against it in order to unlock selected apps. The key feature is that your young adult can still have the phone for practical life calls, texts, navigation, music, banking, but the high dopamine apps like TikTok or Instagram remain blocked unless they intentionally unlock them by tapping the brick. What I like about this is that it reduces the parent-child power struggle. It shifts the dynamic from "you are controlling me" to "the system is the system." It externalizes executive function. Executive functioning refers to the brain's management system: impulse control, planning, working memory, delayed gratification, and self-monitoring. If executive functioning is compromised, the environment can temporarily hold structure. It also reduces what family systems calls symmetrical escalation, where both people escalate intensity and the conflict spirals. When the boundary is environmental, there is less to argue about. The brick can also travel, which matters because inconsistency creates loopholes, and loopholes fuel addiction cycles. Instead of daily fights about phone use, the rule becomes social apps are only unlocked from 7 to 8 p.m. by tapping the brick in the kitchen. No tap, no access, no debate. You are not the bad guy. The boundary is built into the environment. Replace game structure with life structure. Exactly where to push and exactly where to build predictability. Here's the rule. You cannot remove a structured system and leave a vacuum. If gaming was their primary structure, you replace it with life structure that gives the brain predictability and progress. You do this by creating contingency clarity in real life. That means the connection between behavior and outcome becomes obvious. Instead of "look for a job," you say, "each weekday by 1 p.m., 2 applications must be submitted and logged." You are building a quest objective. Instead of "help out more," you define contribution: trash on Mondays and Thursdays, dishes nightly, laundry on Saturdays. Instead of "fix your sleep," you set rhythm: up by 9 a.m. on weekdays, protein within 60 minutes, sunlight walk within 90 minutes. To understand why your 20-something is struggling, we have to look at how gaming and scrolling actually provide a false or automated scaffolding that disappears the moment the screen turns off. In a digital environment, the developers have spent millions of dollars building a structure that supports every one of the brain's weaknesses. They provide the clear objective, the immediate ping of feedback, and the exact next step to take. This is automated scaffolding. It holds the young adult's focus and motivation in place without them having to exert any internal effort. However, because the game does all the heavy lifting for the prefrontal cortex, the brain never has to build its own internal muscles for planning or initiation. When they step away from the screen, that automated support is ripped away, leaving them standing in a vacuum of structure. This is why they look paralyzed. It's like a building trying to stand after the support beams have been removed before the concrete has dried. As parents, your role is to move from controlling to scaffolding. When a child is young, you are the external structure. As they reach their 20s, many parents mistakenly pull all the scaffolding away at once, expecting the young adult to just know how to function. But if their brain has been reliant on the automated scaffolding of digital loops, those internal supports aren't there yet. Scaffolding is not infantilizing. It is the strategic temporary support used to build a permanent structure by creating household contracts, Sunday meetings, and clear if/then contingencies. You aren't doing it for them. You are providing the external frame that allows their prefrontal cortex to practice the manual gears of adulthood. You are the training wheels that allow the neural pathways of discipline and delayed gratification to finally take hold. The goal of this new parenting strategy is fading. In construction, you don't keep the scaffolding up forever, but you also don't tear it down while the roof is still being built. You reduce the support only as the internal structure proves it can hold the weight. The gaming scaffolding provides a quest log so they never have to plan. The parent scaffolding provides a weekly list so they learn how to plan. The gaming scaffolding provides immediate loot for small actions. The parent scaffolding provides Friday access for a week's worth of work, teaching the brain to tolerate the gap between effort and reward. Dear parent, I know it feels like you shouldn't have to help a 22-year-old figure out how to plan their day. You feel like you're coddling them, but I want you to reframe that. You aren't coddling, you are scaffolding. The digital world has been outsourcing their executive function for years. It has made their brains soft by doing all the hard work of organizing, reminding, and rewarding for them. When they step into the real world, they aren't lazy, they are literally unstructured. By stepping in with clear expectations, visual checklists, and tools like the brick, you are providing the external skeleton they need while they build their own internal strength. You are the temporary beams holding up the house while the foundation sets. Don't be ashamed of the scaffolding. Be proud that you're the one helping them build a structure that will eventually stand on its own. However, there is a wonderful tool that I have recommended to my clients that is digital, and when utilized properly, it can remove so much tension and triangulation in an ADHD household. When I recommend the Skylight calendar, it's not because it's a gadget, it's because it functions as a centralized family operating system. In ADHD homes especially, expectations that live only in a parent's voice often turn into power struggles. Verbal reminders activate defensiveness, which activates the amygdala, which suppresses the prefrontal cortex, the very part of the brain responsible for planning, sequencing, and follow-through. When structure is externalized and mounted visibly on the wall, the dynamic shifts from parent versus child to family versus the plan. The system becomes the neutral authority. That shift alone reduces emotional intensity. What makes it especially effective is that it can hold everything in one place. The morning routine checklist, the after-school reset sequence, clearly defined homework blocks, chore assignments, protein or health routines, structured screen windows with defined start and stop times, weekly planning meetings, grocery refill reminders, and sports or extracurricular schedules. Instead of juggling competing demands internally, the brain can rely on visual structure. This reduces working memory strain and decision fatigue, two major executive functioning vulnerabilities in ADHD. It also eliminates cognitive fragmentation. Rather than information being scattered across emails, text threads, paper flyers, fridge notes, and coach group chats, you can simply take a picture of a school schedule, snap a photo of a sports calendar, upload a practice flyer, attach a recipe screenshot, or import events from your phone. When the soccer schedule is visible daily, when dinner plans are attached to the correct night, when a homework sheet is uploaded directly to the task, the brain no longer has to search for what comes next. That reduces task initiation paralysis, the freeze response that happens when the first step feels unclear. The reinforcement component matters too. When tasks are checked off, the visual completion provides microdopamine rewards. ADHD brains are dopamine seeking. Visible progress supports motivation without relying on screens. Parents can layer in simple verbal reinforcement. I saw you completed your reset block. Nice work, which pairs behavioral activation with relational affirmation. Over time, this builds intrinsic motivation because effort is consistently connected to acknowledgement and predictable privileges, not mood-dependent negotiation. Most importantly, the system lowers household stress. Morning routines create momentum. After-school reset blocks prevent the typical afternoon crash. Homework is time-bound rather than endless. Chores are scheduled responsibilities, not surprise demands. Protein and health routines stabilize physiology before performance is expected. Screen windows are defined, reducing negotiation. Weekly planning meetings strengthen executive functioning skills. Grocery reminders eliminate preventable excuses. Sports and extracurricular schedules reinforce time awareness and commitment. When all of this is visible and predictable, the nervous system experiences rhythm instead of chaos. Rhythm signals safety. Safety reduces reactivity. In family systems terms, this moves the household from reactive enforcement to organized leadership. The parent is no longer the constant enforcer or reminder. The system holds the structure. The parent becomes a coach. That shift strengthens autonomy, accountability, and emotional regulation over time, which is why I recommend it so consistently for families navigating ADHD and executive functioning challenges. You create a weekly 20-minute adult life meeting every Sunday at 5 o'clock. You review job applications submitted, interviews scheduled, chores completed, money contributed, and one personal goal. The meeting is calm, consistent, and short. Predictability reduces anxiety. Progress increases dopamine in healthy ways. Regulation from the body up, smoothies, brain fuel, and why. This matters in dopamine recalibration. Now, we talk physiology because you cannot talk a nervous system into regulation if the body is running on unstable fuel. The brain runs primarily on glucose, which comes from carbohydrates, and neurotransmitters are built from amino acids and micronutrients. A simple smoothie routine can function as behavioral medicine. A smoothie made with water, low-fat Greek yogurt, and half a frozen banana is an economical, easy brain fuel base. The Greek yogurt provides protein, which provides amino acids like tyrosine, a precursor involved in dopamine synthesis. The banana provides steady carbohydrates that stabilize glucose delivery to the brain. Using water instead of juice reduces sugar spikes and crashes, which are notorious for worsening irritability, anxiety, and emotional volatility. Then you add frozen fruit and greensberries, mango, spinach, because micronutrients matter. B vitamins support cellular energy metabolism. Magnesium supports nervous system regulation and muscle relaxation. If they wake up and go straight to gaming without food, they are starting the day with dopamine seeking and unstable blood sugar. If the first input is protein and hydration, you are decreasing volatility before it starts. This is not about health perfection. It's about reducing neurochemical chaos. If your 20-something is already sleeping poorly and gaming late, adding a stimulant at noon might worsen the cycle. But using a low-stimulant, nutrient-supportive approach in the morning alongside protein may be helpful. This is where parents can consult a medical provider if there are concerns. Red light therapy involves exposure to red or near-infrared wavelengths. One reason it's discussed is its potential relationship to mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are the energy producers in cells. They generate ATP, which is cellular energy. When cellular energy is supported and inflammation is reduced, mood and recovery can improve for some individuals. Inflammation is the immune system's response to stress, injury, or imbalance. Chronic low-grade inflammation has associations with mood symptoms in some research contexts. Red light therapy is not a cure, but for some families it is a supportive adjunct to improve recovery, sleep quality, and overall regulation. If a young adult is physically sluggish, emotionally flat, and sleep disrupted, adding body-based recovery supports can improve baseline energy, making it more realistic to follow through on structure. Cold showers and cryotherapy work through a concept called hormesis. Hormesis is the biological phenomenon where brief, controlled stress makes the system stronger over time. Cold exposure can increase norepinephrine, a neurotransmitter involved in alertness and mood, and can build distress tolerance when used appropriately. Cold exposure also creates a quick state shift. It interrupts rumination and can help someone feel more awake and regulated afterward. Cryotherapy is a more intense version in a controlled setting. If they are stuck in a foggy, apathetic state, a brief cold shower after waking can act like a nervous system reset button, not as punishment, but as a body-based tool to create momentum. The key is consistency and keeping it safe, brief, and intentional. Sauna use increases circulation and can promote relaxation and recovery. It can increase endorphins, which are natural chemicals involved in pain reduction and well-being. Sauna can also support parasympathetic rebound after heat stress. The parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest system, associated with calm, digestion, and recovery. If your young adult is chronically tense, irritable, and sleep disrupted, consistent sauna use combined with hydration and sleep rhythm may support a calmer baseline. Again, it's not a cure, it's a support. Now we return to relationship because structure without warmth becomes control, and warmth without structure becomes chaos. Attachment theory, Bowlby, explains how relational patterns shape emotional regulation. Some young adults develop avoidant coping strategies, meaning when overwhelmed, they withdraw, shut down, or hide. When parents escalate emotionally, avoidance intensifies. That's not manipulation, it's protection. This is why co-regulation is essential. Co-regulation is the process where one nervous system stabilizes another through tone, predictability, and emotional steadiness. If you deliver boundaries calmly, you reduce amygdala activation. If you deliver boundaries with contempt, sarcasm, or panic, you escalate threat. You can say, "I love you, and this is the expectation," without debate. You can hold the line without humiliating them. You are teaching adult accountability and emotional safety at the same time. I want to name something parents carry silently: ambiguous grief. Ambiguous grief is grief without closure, physically present, but not functioning in the way you imagined. You miss the version of their future you expected, and you feel guilty for feeling that. That grief often leaks out as irritability or over-control. Naming it matters because it keeps you from parenting through resentment. It helps you stay in strategy rather than emotional overflow. If you notice your tone becoming sharp, it may not be about the trash. It may be grief. Grief that says, "I'm scared for you." Strategy begins when you admit what's underneath. The long-term developmental target is internal locus of control. Locus of control refers to whether a person believes outcomes are driven by their actions, internal, or external forces, external. Gaming often reinforces external locus. The system provides rewards on its own schedule. Adulthood requires internal locus. Effort creates outcomes over time. We are also strengthening delayed gratification, the capacity to tolerate discomfort now for payoff later. Delayed gratification is a cornerstone of adult functioning: saving money, applying for jobs, building skills, tolerating rejection. When the expectation is to handle job applications before gaming access, that is not being controlling. That is training delayed gratification and internal locus of control. You are teaching, "I do the hard thing first, then I earn the reward." That is adulthood. If you are listening and thinking, "Fine, but what do I do on Monday?" Here is the integrated approach. You reduce dopamine chaos by limiting unstructured access to high-stimulation apps, ideally using environmental supports like the brick, so it stops becoming a daily fight. You replace game structure with life structure by creating predictable rhythms, clear objectives, and visible progress markers. You protect the relationship by keeping tone calm and warm, using co-regulation, and avoiding shame-based language that triggers avoidance and relapse. You support the body with simple protein-based smoothies, hydration, movement, and optional recovery tools like cold exposure, sauna, or red light therapy as adjunct supports. You do not need perfection. You need repetition. This episode is for educational purposes and to provide support. It's not a substitute for professional mental health evaluation, diagnosis, or treatment. The more we learn to recognize the signs behind the behaviors, the more compassion and support we can offer to our kids, our partners, and ourselves. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode was helpful, I'd love it if you shared it with a fellow parent, caregiver, or educator who might need it too. You can also subscribe to stay up to date on future episodes and check out additional tools and resources at thepathtopeacetherapy.com. Follow me on Instagram at thepathtopeacetherapy. If you are in California, I offer virtual sessions if you are not in the Hermosa Beach and South Bay area. You can book online at thepathtopeacetherapy.com or email me at stephanieb@thepathtopeacetherapy.com. And as always, take a deep breath, give yourself some grace, and remember, peace is possible, and you don't have to do this alone.